I'll bet you'll see me best if I sit down, is that right?
Yes, well, either way, okay.
I'll sit down. You let me know when you're ready.
It's recording right now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, members who are here live and those of you who are tuned in on Zoom. And to our guests, the Weeks. And this is our annual meeting. So we have a number of things on the agenda today. But thanks to the wonders of the internet, some of these things are already accomplished that we had to do for the meeting. One thing that did not get accomplished is the minutes from last year's annual meeting. I thought it would be a piece of cake to find them on my computer. I could not. And Mary hasn't had a chance to do a search on hers since I just let her know this morning. So we will, when those appear, we will send you all a copy of them. And we do have a budget that were presented. Those of you who are interested can take a copy from the table over there. The budget was approved by the board, so that means it is what we will go by for next year. Some of the most important things to know are that we do, in fact, have about the same amount in our bank account that we did at the end of last year. So there are not a whole lot of big changes that way. Things have worked out quite well. We have allotted, or decided at the last meeting to approve $13,000 for the next year's Student Assistance Awards, to include continuing lessons, summer camp awards, and new student awards. And we had a large donation to the outreach classes, the ones that Kimberly runs for Keys for Kids in downtown Asheville, and the one for Crescendo in the Schools for McDowell County, which Nathan Shirley is running. So far, we won't have as much to donate to them this year as we did last year, but both of those programs are off and running, doing very successfully. Nathan's even able to hire an assistant to help him with classes. He has a grant to do that, so excellent news there. Are there any questions from those of you who may have seen the budget report and have questions about things? No one piping up on Zoom, right, with questions?
There's only Kitty and Holly.
Okay,
So far.
all righty. So we will move on from the financial report to our membership report. We have well over 100 members at this point, a number of new members this year, and so we're doing very well that way. In fact, one of the reasons we're able to be as generous as we are with the Student Assistance Awards is because the membership levels, a lot of people have supported the platinum and the gold, silver, and bronze memberships, which is earned income that can be used for our student assistance if everything else is covered, and it appears to be. So that is good news. All right, moving on to the next big order of business, which is we need to honor two people who really stepped up, one for a number of years and one especially this last year. We'll get them to them later. I would like to, for us all to acknowledge Virginia McKnight, who is finishing her 4-year term. Now I know she's really sad about having to take a year off. But as she will discover in her card that I'll give her, that she is going to be able to, quote, wash this board right out of her hair, because the forum is presenting her with a haircut from Sam Austin. So she's smiling, she likes it.
She's still on the student assistance.
Yes, and well, Virginia, I know will continue to be active. So but she has served as an officer as well as just a general board member, and so she's really been such a big help to us, and I know she will continue to be going forward. And the other person I'd like to I'd like to acknowledge is Sue Russell. It's early, guys. Sue Russell, who stepped up this year to be vice president when very few people would do that. It's hard to imagine yourself being an officer of a nonprofit corporation. But Sue has done a wonderful job, not only as vice president this past year, but also helping out with the concert committee and with the general meetings, with the refreshments and the receptions. The list goes on. So we have a little something. I think her card has something to say about music being flowers, being the music of the earth. And so we have a little gift card that'll help her keep those flowers going, perhaps. So those are, I believe, the only 2 people who are actually leaving the board this year. Please don't set other board members pipe them saying, wait, I want to leave too. No. So we do have some members who will be beginning a new 2-year term who we need to vote in, who are currently on the board but will be starting their next term. And I'm not even going to ask for a show of hands because we already have a quorum of the membership who has approved all of our nominees. But Sam Austin, Bill Bears, actually Dan's starting a new 2-year term as well, I believe. And so, yeah, and then of course we have voted in the new slate of officers. I will continue to serve as president for the next year, and Leonidas Lagrimas has agreed to be vice president, and he's such a busy guy. I really appreciate it. He's busy, but you know what? He gets things done. I think maybe he has a couple clones running around different places, and we don't really know if this is the real one, but he's always so helpful and has been already starting to put together next year's presentations. So this is, he's such a big help to us and plays wonderfully as well. Then we have Dan will continue to be our treasurer, and Mary Holmes will continue. She has been secretary this past year, and she's continuing to be secretary going forward. And then we have 3 new members of the board joining. Not necessarily new. We have some experienced former board members joining. In fact, all 3 of them are. Wayne Smith, who's here today and helping out, getting the church ready, is rejoining. He's going to be helping with competition, maybe some of the secretarial duties such as thank you notes. So, you know, he's going to be a big asset that way. And then Leslie Downs is going to be joining the board. And of course, Les has experience as a performer, as a teacher. He's been on the board before, so and he's just so good at everything he does. We're really grateful that he's willing to serve. And then Dominic Rajagopal, who has been a student member for the last 2 years, is no longer, he's received his, or he is in the process of receiving his associate's degree, and so will not be a student in the fall. So we're so grateful. He's been so helpful, both with the website and with his opinions on technical things and things that the rest of us might not think of. He is now going to be a full voting member. So, have I left out anyone? I don't think I have. So I think we're finished with that matter of business. I do want to say that, including today, we've had a marvelous group of presentations with Jenna Jaffe in November, and Leonidas doing the master class. We had a wonderful September presentation too.
Duets?
Oh, that's right, Bill Bears. Oh, wow, that was a terrific one. And I know listening to the presentation today is going to be equally wonderful. We've the fall and spring concerts, both very successful, and I know we were all kind of holding our breath because Wayne Smith had been taking charge of the concerts for the past 3 or 4 years, but Bill Bears is such an experienced performer, and as what shall I say, administration with different kinds of things. And he has brought innovations to the concerts in terms of how we operate, which have been very, very helpful. And both concerts were very successful. Practice for Pets kept going as usual. The only thing we've kind of fallen down on, and I pledge myself that we will make sure we get going again, are the teacher roundtable discussion groups. I've had a number of people say, what about those groups? When are we going to do them? So I'm hoping maybe even in June we can get one going. So stay tuned for that. What other activities do we do? Oh, I don't know. We do so much in the piano forum. It's just a great group. And I do want to say, too, about this board that I have worked with this past year. It's been the best, most cooperative, most responsive board that I think I've ever had. And I think, well, I have a feeling the new board will be able to maybe even come up to its equal this year. So that's good. Any questions from the floor? I didn't even ask for nominations from the floor. Were there any from people here today? None from there. Yeah, Polly's already given her vote. Who else is there? Judy?
Kitty went in.
Kitty already voted.
Those
So
are the only two.
yeah, so
They
we're.
probably didn't get the time change.
Oh well.
I'm guessing people that are not here on Zoom.
Oh well. There are a number of people going to the symphony concert this afternoon. So. Oh right. So that's why we're getting a nice early start, and we really appreciate everyone's cooperation in getting ready for this early time today.
Can I add
Yes.
something? Just that one of the things that Bill Bears added for the concerts was a new ticketing system, which made life easier. We actually made extra money because of that, because we didn't have to pay. People that bought tickets through the ticket center had to pay for their own fees. They had to pay the PayPal fee or the credit card fee. Usually we pay that. So we ended up $200 ahead from where we would have been if we had sold the tickets ourselves. And it was just so much easier.
Yeah, for those of you who weren't listening, we were talking about the new ticket system and what a boon that is to the forum. It actually can increase, and if we get it really set up with social media for next year, it'll be even more effective that way. Any other topics from the floor? All right, I'm going to turn things over to Leonidas then, and we can, I don't know what the time is. How are we doing?
It's
9:10.
Well, you know what? We might, do you want to wait a few minutes and have coffee and snacks, or you want to get going?
Let's get going.
All right, let's get going.
Can I make an announcement about something?
Yeah.
Wanted to invite somebody. I've talked to a few people individually, but wanted to say that I'm getting a concert together. It'll be kind of a chiller reproductive justice salon style concert on Monday, the 24th of June. That is the anniversary of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. And so I'm trying to get a program together, maybe like more like intimate type of concert with some panelists from local organizations and whatnot, and a program of music by women. So if you have any works that you've been playing by women composers that you think might be a great addition to this program, or if you want to learn something, or if you want to talk about that and get some recommendations from yours truly over here, very excited about that. Talk to me, Nicole Lopez.
Does it have to be classical music?
Thanks, Nicole.
Whatever you
Because
want now.
I've written a lot of jazz.
There we go.
You might
Yes.
know.
Anything goes, anything goes. Yeah. Jazz is
And how, thanks, Nicole, for that. And how could I forget to remind you all that Wayne Smith and I, the Swananoa Piano Duo,
Yes.
are having two fundraising, this is the same program, we're doing it twice, to raise funds for the outreach classes for AAPF. It's not an official concert sponsored by the Piano Forum, it's something we're doing privately. And the first one is Tuesday, the 28th, the day after Memorial Day, or Memorial Day celebration. Tuesday at 7 o'clock at St. James Episcopal Church in Black Mountain. And the second concert is Friday at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, right here upstairs in the First Congregational Church. So come on out. It doesn't cost anything, and you're welcome to come whether you can contribute or not. But we will have a basket, and people can also donate online. Mary?
Can you just give me that second date?
May
The second
31st.
May 31st.
May 31st,
At
yeah.
4 o'clock here.
Oh.
Yeah.
So if you write a check, would you write it to the piano forum?
Yes, but on the notation,
Oh.
put, yeah, if you're writing a check. Okay, now Leonidas, I'll let you introduce our guest speaker today.
All right, so before we start, I just wanted to echo Karen, just from my capacity the past year as presentations chair. We've been so lucky to have four, well, I guess I was one of the four, so yes, I was wonderful too, as four wonderful presenters this year, and I'm already working on next year. We have a really interesting slate of potential topics in the lineup for next year that I'm really excited about. So really my only thing to say is, let's work to increase attendance at these things. We'd love to see more folks, and I hope that, even our, a lot of people might assume that maybe these are just for the professional members, but hopefully we can get our, our amateur members involved, and our younger members and our younger teachers involved in this as well to come to these presentations. So with that in mind, I'm so excited to welcome our presenter for our fourth and final presentation of the year. Steinway artist Douglas Weeks is Babcock Professor of Piano Emeritus at Converse University. Boy, this is a long one. I'm going to sum this up as best as I can, but he's performed all over the world. In the spring of 1999, he taught at the Conservatory of Music in Cairo as a Fulbright senior scholar, and he returned there twice. And he's also taught at the Conservatory at Helwan University as a Fulbright senior specialist. He is the prize winner, a prize winner in the Cleveland International Piano Competition and a competitor in the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow. He holds the Doctor of Music degree from Florida State University, so I'm proud to welcome a fellow Knoll to the stage. Can everyone please give a warm welcome to Dr. Doug Weeks.
Well, I'm delighted to be with you this morning. What a beautiful morning it is. I'm going to read from my notes, otherwise I'll extemporize for 2 hours. I timed this at about an hour. It'll hopefully be right around that, and that should leave a little bit of time for questions. I'd like to open with the prelude from Book 1 of the Well-Tempered in B-flat minor, which I think is, and I think you will agree, is one of the most beautiful that he wrote. So here it is. So, this is the end of my 4th year of retirement from Converse. And a few years ago, I decided to take on a project that I don't think I could. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm going to move it under so it doesn't. It was sitting on the strings. Okay, I'm going to be flipping pages. Okay. I just didn't want it touching the strings. Okay, thank you.
The cable was resting on the strings, it was affecting the sound of the piano.
Oh, I couldn't tell.
I couldn't either.
Thank you. So a few years ago, I decided to take on a project that I don't think I could ever have attempted before I retired, learning all of the preludes and fugues in the Well-Tempered Clavier that I'd neither taught nor performed. So last year, I worked on all of Book 1 except for the A minor prelude and fugue, and since October, I've been working on all of Book 2. I've also read several books or portions of books, including ones by Paul de Escoda, David Schulenberg, Ralph Kirkpatrick, Herman Keller, and David Ledbetter. Also, many summers ago, my Brevard Music Center piano colleague Bruce Murray presented a 6-week course on the WTC, where he both lectured on and performed all 48 preludes and 48 fugues over a period of 6 weeks. That summer was an inspiration, and I took copious notes. So today I'd like to give a brief background on the WTC and then discuss and play several of the greatest fugues from books 1 and 2. Of course, what Bach fugue isn't great. 2 disclaimers. 1, I am not a Bach scholar. And 2, I am not a Bach specialist. I have, however, played a good deal of Bach, and I've read a bit about Bach, and I simply adore Bach. I think there were at least 4 qualities that came together in Bach. The first is innate genius. That unexplainable, unfathomable quality that people like Shakespeare, Michelangelo, Einstein, and others were born with. In other words, off-the-scale intelligence. The second quality is more fathomable. Bach possessed tireless curiosity. He had access while working in various positions to a huge number of both manuscripts and published scores by composers near and far. Consequently, he studied and became familiar with the styles of the most important composers in Germany, Austria, France, and Italy. He often made copies of their scores and arranged their music for other instruments, and he did this throughout his life. The musicologist Donald Grout summed it up when he said that Bach, quote, absorbed into his music the multiplicity of genres, styles, and forms current in the 18th century and developed them into hitherto unexpected potentialities. In other words, Bach was the consummate student. A third quality is that Bach was a perfectionist. He was constantly revising his own works, always looking for ways to improve a composition. And indeed, many of the preludes and fugues in the WTC underwent several revisions before leading up to the final product. The end result, as Grout says, is technical perfection in every detail. Other great composers shared this quality, of course, and Beethoven and Chopin both come to mind. And speaking of Chopin, his friend, the painter Eugène Delacroix, once asked Chopin what constituted logic in music. Chopin's answer, listen to a Bach fugue. And the fourth quality is tied to the third, work ethic. I think we've all had gifted students who didn't work very hard. And we've also had students of lesser ability who pushed themselves to the max. Bach was a genius who pushed himself to the max. And there's a fifth reason that I believe might be part of the mix, but it is totally subjective and more a feeling than a thought. Bach, as you know, was an extremely humble man who possessed the deep and abiding faith in God. And I believe I hear this in his music. So, all of these qualities came together to create a perfect storm, or better put, a perfect miracle. The Well-Tempered Clavier is, as Bruce Murray put it, a distillation of everything Bach believed about music. The first volume, 24 preludes and 24 fugues in all major and minor keys, was completed in 1722. or maybe I should say nearly completed, as Bach, the perfectionist, went on to make several revisions after this date. The second volume of Preludes and Fugues was completed in 1744, 22 years after the first volume, but Bach gave no title to this second collection. How is Book 2 different from Book 1? According to Herman Keller, the primary difference is in the greater variety of forms in the Book 2 preludes. Others state that in Book 2, the counterpoint is smoother, the harmonic range is wider, and the melodic lines are longer. Also, according to Ledbetter, Book 2 is more concerned with demonstrating different kinds of counterpoint. My own experience with Book 2 is that it is in general more difficult and demanding than Book 1. Book 2, by the way, also draws a lot of material from J.K.F. Fischer's Adriana Musica. And in this regard, Bach and Chopin were very similar, as Chopin, in composing his etudes, drew inspiration, modeling on etudes of Moscheles, Kramer, and others. And, like Bach, Chopin transformed those etudes into works with, quote, hitherto unsuspected potentialities. Oops. Bach introduced the first volume of the WTC with this inscription: the well-tempered clavier, or preludes and fugues through all the tones and semitones, both as regards the tertia major or ut, re, mi, and as concerns the tertia minor or re, mi, fa. For the profit and use of the musical youth desirous of learning, as well as for the special pastime of those who are already skilled in this study. Composed and written down by Johann Sebastian Bach, at present Kapellmeister to His Serene Highness, the Prince of Anhalt-Köthen, and the director of his chamber music, anno 1722. So the primary purpose of the WTC, in addition to writing substantial pieces in all major and minor keys, was for instruction. Bach's method for teaching keyboard to his children and his other students was to first teach technique, and he did so in this order: finger exercises, then the little preludes and other small pieces such as those in Wilhelm Friedemann's Klavierbuchlein, then the inventions and sinfonias, then a series of suites, and finally the well-tempered clavier. Friedemann's Klavierbuchlein, or Little Keyboard Book, was begun in 1720 when Bach's youngest son Friedemann was 10. And among its 62 pieces are 11 that will later appear either reworked or left virtually intact as preludes in Book 1. Each piece taught a certain aspect of technique, beginning with the simplest, and the succession of keys is C major, C minor, D minor, D major, E major, F major. I hope that's Book 1. C sharp major, C sharp minor, E flat minor, and F minor. Whoops, F minor is drawing a blank. regarding writing pieces in all tones and semitones, in 1708, the aforementioned composer J.K.F. Fisher wrote preludes and fugues for organ in 20 keys, and 11 years later, in 1719, the composer and theorist Johann Mattheson wrote figure-based studies in all 24 keys. But it was Bach who in 1722 was the first to compose fully realized, substantial pieces in all 12 major and 12 minor keys. Interestingly, there are 6 keys which appear only in the WTC and nowhere else in all of Bach's compositions. C sharp major, D sharp minor, F sharp major, A flat major, G sharp minor, and a 6th key that I didn't write down and can't remember. Clavier was, of course, the generic term in Bach's time for any keyboard instrument, which primarily meant harpsichord, clavichord, and organ. There is disagreement, however, regarding whether Bach wrote anything in the WTC with the organ in mind. And the consensus seems to be that he did not. But there is another instrument that was popular in Bach's time called a Lautenwerk, or lute harpsichord. The strings were made of gut instead of metal, and its sound was so much like that of a plucked lute that evidently, as I've read, professional lutists in another room thought they were hearing an actual lute being played. In that Bach never designated which keyboard instrument he had in mind for a particular prelude or fugue, a Lautenwerk can clearly be considered as a possibility. And I played just a tiny bit of the E flat minor prelude. I could hear that on the Lautenwerk. By the way, if you're interested, you can Google Lautenwerk there, and a maker comes up, a maker of Lautenwerks and harpsichords. And it's interesting, you can actually hear a Lautenwerk by Googling the website. Regarding the preludes, David Ledbetter wrote that, quote, by 1720, Bach could draw on cosmopolitan prototypes from sonata, dance, and aria, as well as from his own development of the invention principle. All these, the non-specific title of prelude, allowed him to treat with some freedom. Ledbetter goes on to say that Book 1 has every sign of being a systematic demonstration of the variety of the prelude as a genre, designed to give a comprehensive educational scheme covering both playing technique and composition. Regarding fugue, Ledbetter said that for Bach, counterpoint was the supreme art of keyboard playing, and it was a lifelong obsession. And although the main purpose of the WTC was to provide pieces in all 24 keys and to provide instruction, variety of character and expression in both preludes and fugues was of extreme importance. Regarding the linking of preludes and fugues, not all were composed together, and many were composed separately. Also, many pieces originated in a different key and were transposed to a new key for the Well-Tempered Clavier. Regarding interpretation, Willard Palmer, in his excellent foreword to Book 1 of the WTC published by Alfred, gives metronome marks for all of the preludes and fugues performed by 20 different harpsichordists and pianists. Now, I know this chart is impossible to see, but it shows you what Palmer did. Just imagine the time that this took to listen and write down metronome indications. So at the very top, Rosalind Turret took the opening C major prelude from book 1 at 52 to the quarter note, whereas Edwin Fisher played the same prelude at 96, almost twice as fast with a whole range in between. Palmer also notated the articulation of the subjects of all 24 fugues as performed by 16 to 20 keyboardists. And again, the range is striking. For the book 1 C major prelude, or fugue rather, Palmer lists no less than 10 variants of the subject, and you can see them all right here. Several of them did the same thing, several did the same thing, but then Kirkpatrick, for example, Busoni had different interpretations for just how to articulate and phrase the opening subject. Obviously, though, all one has to do is to listen on YouTube, Spotify, and others to great artists such as Angela Hewitt, Andras Schiff, and Glenn Gould performing the same prelude and fugue to reach the same conclusion. Obviously, there is no one way to interpret a given prelude and fugue, and I say amen to that. A few tidbits regarding tempo. Bach rarely wrote an Italian tempo indication, but in general, in a time signature, the higher the lower number, the faster the tempo, meaning that 3/16 is faster than 3/8. But there are exceptions. For example, according to Ledbetter, cut time, or 2/2, for Bach sometimes implied not too slow a tempo. And interestingly, when Bach wrote Largo, as he did in the book 2 G minor fugue, he evidently did not mean the slowest tempo possible as we think of it now, because to Bach, Largo was actually somewhat faster than Adagio. But again, I'll point to the range of tempi in Willard Palmer's chart and in the YouTube performances. So what is a truly authentic articulation, tempo, character? Probably whatever tempo, etc. Bach took on a given day, on a given instrument, in a given mood, and especially within the given character of the piece. And this has been my experience working on preludes and fugues for the last 2 years, because I will discover way down the road that the tempo I've been taking actually works better at a slightly faster or slower tempo. And this happened not infrequently. For me, for what I believe sounds best. And finally, here's a brief refresher on the structure of fugues. There are 3, 4, and 5 voice fugues in the WTC, and there's even a 2-voice fugue in the first book. The main thematic material of the fugue, as you know, is the subject, and when the subject is heard as originally presented at the beginning of a fugue, it is called, for clarification, the recto, R-E-C-T-O. So it's distinguished from, say, inverted subject. When the initial subject ends, the voice continues with a counter subject that accompanies the subject that is now heard in the new voice which has just entered. A preserved counter subject is where the counter subject is present every time a subject enters. Bach's counter subjects both contrast and complement the subjects in marvelous and ingenious ways, and of the 24 fugues in book 1 of the WTC, no less than 15 have preserved counterpoints. And it's amazing how frequently Bach will derive the counter subject and other major material from the subject itself. In this way, it's very much like Beethoven, as you know, who would take an A theme and look at it all kinds of different ways and carve it up and use motives in absolutely ingenious ways in a very different style, but with the same idea in mind. And while it is easy to imagine that Bach would first devise a subject and then began adding other voices, Bach actually began with the chord progression, and he did so by first writing a bass line with chord symbols on top, i.e. figured bass. David Ledbetter said that, quote, Bach is always working outward from the harmonic tonal skeleton and imposing layers of melodic and contrapuntal decoration on it. This makes perfect sense, as Bach's chord progressions are ingenious and absolutely gorgeous. Those areas where the subject is present are called expositions, as you know, which usually stay in a key, usually. And expositions alternate with episodes, which contain only fragments of the themes and which almost always modulate to a new key. Almost always. Bach often manipulates the subject through inversion, turning the subject upside down through rhythmic augmentation and rhythmic diminution, where note values are heard twice as slow or twice as fast as originally heard, and through the use of stretto, where the subject enters in a given voice before the previous subject has ended in another. The most complex fugues incorporate all three of these devices. There are also double fugues and triple fugues, where there are 2 or 3 individual subjects, first heard separately and then down the road heard in combination. And now I'd like to play for you several of Bach's most complex fugues. I'll start with, and there are many. I'll start with the B-flat minor Book 1 fugue that is paired with the prelude that I opened this lecture with a few minutes ago. It is a 5-voice fugue, one of only 2 5-voice fugues in Book 1, the other one being C-sharp minor. Which is another absolutely fabulous, great triple fugue that I could just as easily have chosen, but I chose ones that I wanted to play. So, there are no 5-voice fugues in Book 2. It is a stretto fugue, so-called because of the great number of overlapping entrances of the subject. Both the prelude and the fugue are vocally oriented. They have similar moods and tempi, and both display prominent double thirds, sixths, and tenths throughout. However, Bach frequently features double thirds, double sixths, double tenths. Sorry. The somber mood of this fugue is established right off the bat with a sine motive of a falling perfect fourth. This is followed by a dramatic upward leap of a minor ninth, big interval for Baroque music, which is then followed by a 5-note descending and ascending scale fragment. The subject, highlighted in yellow, is 3 measures long, but stretto begins immediately with the alto voice entering on the first beat of the 3rd measure before the soprano subject has ended. And you can see at the top of the page, on all of these open scores that I'm going to show you, I've marked, I hope I've marked all of the entrances of subjects with an arrow. So you can see that there's a 2-measure, the subject enters 2 measures alone, but then the subject enters in the alto on the 3rd measure. What is interesting is that this will happen several times, but then about halfway through the fugue, or a little bit more than halfway, he will compress the entrances. And here you see in the 2nd line, here's the subject entering in the soprano, but on the half measure, 2nd beat, it's entering. So that's tighter stretto. What that does is create more tension. And then just a little bit later, you see that it enters in the base, and only a measure later, again, tightening the distance, shortening the distance, again, increasing tension. The fugue ends with a tremendous stretto. It's actually a quintuple stretto with voices entering at consecutive half-measure intervals, and here you see it. First entrance, second entrance, third entrance, fourth entrance, fifth entrance. This is really impossible to bring out on a keyboard instrument by the nature of the instrument. You could imagine it being played by 5 different instruments with 5 different colors, and then you would hear very clearly. But when I play this, I'm trying to think that way. It probably won't come across, but try. Sidebar, just before the quintuple stretto, almost hidden, right here, is the opening descending scale pattern, now in rhythmic augmentation with the original quarter notes turned into whole notes 4 times slower than the original values. And it's kind of hidden. It's like all of a sudden, wow, there it is. There it is. Thank you, Leo. It's fine. next fugue I'd like to play for you is the Gavotte-like F sharp major from Book 2. It's one that I've learned relatively recently that I was totally unfamiliar with. It delightfully contrasts the B-flat minor fugue that I just played, and its light and playful character belies its remarkably tight and overall symmetrical structure. It has 5 expositions and 4 episodes. And you can see by this the near symmetry. As you can see, the first, third, and 5th episodes all feature 3-part invertible counterpoint where the lines keep shifting. I'll sing what this person sang a little bit ago, and then that person sings what the other person sang, and then we just keep switching off parts. Whereas the 2nd and 4th episodes, sandwiched in between 1, 3, and 5, just have a single subject. There is no other fugue quite like this one. The fugue opens with a trill. And normally, of course, we'd begin the trill on the auxiliary note, but in this case, I don't think it works, because what it is, it's like the opposite of a sigh going, it's going up, and he is going to use this little 3-note figure in a way which I'm going to show you in a second. So it makes sense to do that. However, there's going to be a little bit of inconsistency because a couple of times in the course of this fugue, I will begin on the auxiliary, because in that case, it's not preceded by any, it's not like this, which is not preceded by anything, and I think it just sounds a little better. Ah, yes, and also because here's the subject, here's the entrance of the subject in the soprano, here's the counter subject, it's in blue. Counter subject is this. There's your side move. Not only that, but the preceding prelude and fugue is in F minor, and the prelude goes. The very next fugue, he's doing this over and over again. So here's the first episode, which I call episode A, and here's your 3-part counterpoint. And what I've numbered, here's the opening trill, and here's number 1, and it's that same form as far as the intervallic progression. Number 2 is simply this rising fourth, which is featured at the end of the subject, and here it is. And then the third one is more rhythm than not, but it's a descending 4-note figure, and here we have the same thing rhythmically, a little bit different, but very similar. So he has taken elements from the subject and developed them in his episode, and there might be things that I've missed that are there. So what he does in the episodes is to exploit invertible, 3-part invertible counterpoint. But then in episode B, look what he's done. He's got his sighing motive, which is the counter subject. Over and over and over. So all I can figure it out, he must have really loved that from the F minor fugue. And here it is.
in this one, that's what they're not.
I think it goes there.
Here? Oh, no, it goes this one.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not up on the screen.
and then we have to scroll.
Except it's no longer on this.
Uh-oh.
I have no idea.
Maybe it doesn't need to-
I think the plug is on the other side.
No, it has to,
It wasn't there.
it doesn't fit this one. The shape, see, it has to be this one. This is the only one that goes into.
Look on the left.
And maybe set it down,
Oh,
because
there we
it's
are.
moving, so
Yeah, that's, okay, we're good.
that's part of it.
We are good.
Okay, so we go back to, play, so we can escape this.
Escape it. So yeah, do you wanna
Right there.
just show the slide you're around? Yeah, that's what we're.
There we go. Okay, so here's F sharp, major fugue. That is just, thank you, a delightful little fugue. And as I said, it belies the simplicity, this incredibly tight construction, and it's not easy to play because there are so many different articulations going on at once that the pianist has to keep track of. You can't lose concentration. The Book 1 Prelude and Fugue in E-flat minor is interesting because, among other reasons, the prelude is notated in E-flat minor, but the fugue has a key signature of D-sharp minor. Why? Because Bach originally wrote the fugue in D minor and then simply added sharps. At any rate, it is the only prelude and fugue pair with two different key signatures. And one thing I've learned from this is that reading in E-flat minor is not so bad, but reading in D-sharp minor is a bear. The D-sharp minor fugue is one of the most complex that Bach wrote. It displays subject inversion, subject augmentation, and triple stretto. And as if this were not complicated enough, Bach modified the augmentation in several ways in the different combinations with both subject and inverted subject. For example, there's strict or recto augmentation with note values exactly twice as long as the subject, but there's also, augmentation with dotted rhythms. Furthermore, augmentation can happen in inversion along with the regular recto subject. So here's the sequence of events, and I put these in boxes. First comes at the very top an exposition. Then at the bottom, you see a double stretto. Then at the top, you see a triple stretto with rhythm, dotted augmentation. Second down is another double stretto. Third down, you see now that the subject is inverted, and it's another exposition. And then it's inverted again. And then we have at the very top here a double stretto with subject inverted in both top and bottom. And then we see, second down, a double stretto with augmentation, and again it's the dotted augmentation. Then under that, our first triple stretto, and then he tops that with, at the bottom, a triple stretto with augmentation, dotted augmentation in the middle voice, and straight augmentation in the very top voice right here. And then a double stretto with subjects inverted. Oh wait, let me go in the right direction. No, and then that's it. And so the very last event is that triple stretto with two different kinds of augmentation. Of these 12 events that you just saw, 11 are unique, and only one is repeated, that being a double stretto. Indeed, this fugue has a greater combination and concentration of devices than any other fugue in the entire well-tempered clavier. Regarding its structure, Hermann Keller wrote, there is these almost incredible combinations of the subject are naturally much more than a mere expression of a very highly developed contrapuntal technique. The augmentation is a subject. The augmentation of a subject is for Bach a symbol of inner greatness as for example in the first credo and in the Confiteor of the B minor Mass. From this, the final exposition of this fugue gains a breadth and solemnity which one could not have guessed at the beginning. Perhaps not surprisingly, Bach said this was one of his finest fugues. That says a lot. in Pierce, I added octaves at the very end. Because it's such a mammoth ending, and it sounds like it should be played on the organ. And one would think he wrote this for the organ, but from what I've read, this is something I didn't know before. Bach often would write for a certain instrument or combination in the style of another. And he most likely wrote this in the style of organ music, but he didn't really write it for organ. It was written for clavier, for harpsichord or clavichord. But it's so easy to hear an organ throughout. And also, it's a great example of Bach beginning in darkness, pain, and ending in absolute triumph. And now I'd like to play for you the fugue in C sharp minor from Book 2. It is a double fugue. I have very little to say here, actually. It is a double fugue with a time signature of 12/18, and Ledbetter calls it a lively gigue. It is also a moto perpetuo with constant 16th notes, and it features inversion and an amazing amount of fragment imitation. The slower counter subject beautifully contrasts and complements the whirling subject, and the counter subject also hints at what will eventually become the second subject. So this is a double fugue. I love the energy of this fugue, and the chord progressions are absolutely fabulous. And now that I probably put you in a deep fugue state, there's one last fugue I'd like to play, B minor from Book 2. B flat minor from Book 2.
I'm just reading your slide.
I was thinking, wait, is that a B minor? The prelude that precedes it borrows heavily from the prelude in the same key in Book 1, the one that I performed at the beginning of this lecture.
Don't worry, we all remember it.
I'm getting in a fugue state
You're in
myself. So here again is the theme from that. And interestingly, the prelude to this B flat minor fugue is not a fugue, but it acts very much like a fugue, and it's, some people say it's a three-part invention. And the subject goes on. So he's clearly borrowing from himself, because that is from B flat minor Book 1, and this is B flat minor Book 2. So it's pointing back 22 years. David Ledbetter said, "This is the grandest, most ingenious, but also one of the most expressive of Bach's fugues." Busoni said that it was the greatest fugue in Book 2. And Glenn Gould said that it was the greatest fugue in the WTC. It is a massive, organ-like, four-voice stretto fugue with a plethora of keys and modulations and with remarkably strict stretto throughout. Here are the 5 expositions: the opening, and then the subject in stretto, and then the counter subject, the subject and counter subject both in inversion, and then subject inverted in stretto, and finally both original stretto and inverted subject together in stretto. Oh, I'm sorry. It's rather broad in 3/2. Here's the counter subject. It's a rising chromatic scale. Almost the full chromatic scale going up. That counter subject is preserved in the exposition, but it's not preserved in the stretto sections, and here's why. Because in the stretto, Bach actually comes in with the second voice on the second beat of the measure. This is unbelievably tight stretto because the echoing voice is coming in absolutely on the heels of the initial entrance of the subject. I can't imagine the complexity of this. There's no room for a chromatically rising counter subject. I don't think. Bach would have done it. Come on, he would have done it. I don't think it could be done. But he does something absolutely ingenious because we almost always need that counter subject. So what he does in the very beginning, notice that here in the third system, in that alto line, I have an arrow going up and an arrow going straight ahead. The counter subject actually is continuing as a dotted whole note. But notice that in the upper voice at the same time, he's got quarter notes separated by quarter rests. Sometimes this dotted whole note will remain, but most often it won't. But we hear this in different voices over the stretto subject again and again and again. And what I think Bach has done is to use this as a functioning mini counter subject to add more structural interest, to make it even more ingenious. So one of the challenges for the pianist is to observe those rests and have them audibly heard without making too big a deal out of them and hitting people over the head, because that's not the main idea. And as if all this weren't enough, one episode employs, again, 3-part invertible counterpoint. He just throws that in. Oh, I think I'll do some invertible counterpoint. This is an absolutely amazing fugue. I know I say absolutely a lot, but it is. This, by the way, that I'm using is our cat toy.
Dogs like it too.
Yeah.
My dog loves.
We had a cat, Rita and I, years ago, and at one point I noticed when I was practicing that it was batting some invisible thing on the wall right to the left, right here. And then I realized that back when I wore a watch, it was reflecting the piano light, and every time I'd move my wrist, the light would go like this, and the cat was chasing it all over. me is an immensely difficult. There's just so much going on, so much to keep track of. And again, it builds and builds and builds and builds. And again, I doubled a lot at the very end. It just seems to be begging for it. And purists would say absolutely anathema, but that's the way I hear it. And finally, before I open the floor for questions, I hope there's enough time. I turn my watch off. If you'd like to access open scores, simply Google the Well-Tempered Clavier and open score. And someone named Kyle Rothler transcribed all 48 fugues into open score, and he did it gratis. As on every single page it says, no rights reserved. Can you imagine, as a labor of love, what this guy did? So thank you, Kyle Rothler. Otherwise, they were in a very expensive score, which is even no longer available, I don't think. So this is easily accessible online. Thank you, Leo, for scrolling through the open score, and thank you to Eric for helping me set everything up last night. Questions?
I just want to say to begin with that I disagree with you about not being an expert on Bach and not being expert playing it and whatever. It was just fabulous.
Thank you.
There were a couple of comments in the chat box from someone who said, I'll just read this. This talk is wonderful and I think accessible to all instrumentalists alike. Beautiful performances. And then I think it was the F sharp minor, what you said was like an organ. He meant it. He was thinking organ. He made it to sound like an organ, even though it was written for.
Yes. Yeah.
And she said, I was thinking organ the whole time.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that.
And thank you so much.
There are two books. The one by Ledbetter and the one by, I think it's Eulenberg, it might be Eulenberg. The scholarship is off the scale in these books. What these people have done, the research they've done, is just rather mind-boggling. So, especially in reading what I've read in those books, I've learned a whole lot myself, but I'm nowhere in the company of these scholars.
And in those sources you just mentioned, do they tell you where the strettos and the inversions and all that stuff is? Like if you're lazy, you don't want to figure it all out.
No, what I always love to do, and this goes way back, I love analyzing it. I'll do it myself first. And then I'll go and I'll look at somebody else's analysis because it resonates much more deeply if I've discovered, oh, wow, look what's going on here. So for example, when I learned the Liszt Sonata years ago, I analyzed it and loved analyzing it. And then I went back and I read it. Because actually with the Liszt Sonata, there are a couple of different ideas. Back and forth. I don't know if that answers the question. No, I don't read. No. Yeah, no. So in other words, a lot of this I've done myself.
Okay, well, I want somebody else to do the work for me if you just.
No, it's not that it isn't mentioned, but so much of, for example, Ledbetter, he goes into incredible detail, but not so much into the form. It has to do with the background of and the different transformations that occurred from the original copy to all these different copies, and what's going on. And also, what amazes me with these scholars is their knowledge of how Bach learned from other composers. And exactly what he learned, and that's something I can't go into because I don't know enough about.
All right, I have several questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I've had eye surgery, so I'm looking very modern. This was a wonderful, inspiring presentation. I've been taking notes, and I had the music out. I wondered if he was writing the art of the fugue when he did that last. Yeah,
yes.
It sounds so similar in the chromaticism and the complexity.
Yes, yeah, that you're right on the money, right? Yes, absolutely.
The other thing I wondered, I had a harpsichord teacher, amazing, from Vienna, Isolde Algrim, who, believe it or not, had all the preludes and fugues, both volumes, and the art of the fugue memorized. I think maybe the only person in music history who could do that. But I think this would be very difficult to play on a harpsichord, even a two manual. You'd be so confused. Where are you in this, you know?
Well, I'm not a harpsichordist, although when I was looking for a job, when I was working on my master's, I got a call from Humboldt State, which has now changed its name, in Arcata, California. A woman actually called me and she said, "We're interested in you, but we need somebody who plays and can teach harpsichord." And I said, "Oh, I'm afraid I don't play the harpsichord, but I can learn real fast." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And so the first opportunity I had then when I was at Florida State, I took harpsichord lessons with the fabulous teacher, Carol Loenar. And I really, really got into it. It's just a world in itself, and I would lose myself in especially the music of the Elizabethan composers like Roland Bird, which I don't think works on the piano at all, but on the harpsichord, it's just absolutely amazing. And what I gained an appreciation for was the importance of articulation in playing piano. So something I really rely on heavily to express the structure of the music. But having said that, you can't deny the role of dynamics, which makes it all the more difficult because there are so many choices that you have to make, but at the same time absolutely enriches the music. And I thought, what would Bach, if he lived today, think about playing on the piano? And it's a moot point, but I can't help but think that considering the great choral works that Bach wrote, considering the Brandenburg Concerti and the dynamic changes, even though they weren't what we experienced now with classical romantic era, nonetheless, especially with the organ and the power of the organ, I can't help but think that he would really appreciate what the piano can do, the modern piano, to add dynamics as an expressive device. And I'm not really putting that over the harpsichord because it comes down, I think, to personal taste and preference. Somebody's going to prefer it on the harpsichord. You can't disagree. It's what they hear. But what I'm saying is that with piano, I do think it becomes more complex.
I don't think you can play that B flat minor from fugue from the first volume very well on a harpsichord. I mean, the emotion just doesn't come through, whereas it does on the piano. I love that you opened with that. That was a beautiful opening.
I completely agree with you. The piano has a sustain, the harpsichord.
Right. Yeah.
So I try to make Bach pianistic, taking advantage of what the piano has to offer with hopefully not crossing a certain line. Although I do love these big swells and these fugues, and not all of them, you know, where they grow and grow and grow with this tremendous feeling of victory in the climactic end.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Yeah.
There's one more comment on here from Kiki Reynolds. She said, "This was amazing. Thanks so much. I would be there if it weren't for the Symphony of Bouffard."
I have a couple things I'm curious about or just want to say. First of all, with organ and harpsichord, I think they're more similar than pianists, either one. And what I learned when I was studying, I'm a pianist, but what I learned when I was studying is it has a great deal to do with rhythm.
Yes.
To give the impression of dynamics.
Right.
And if you do that, then it works out pretty well.
Absolutely, and I learned that when I was taking
I
harpsichord.
bet you did.
Timing.
Yeah, because I think that's what you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other thing I was wondering about, I believe is it the B major or B minor in the first book uses all 12 tones for
Right.
its fugue. And that just, when I saw that just blew my mind.
Oh, it's amazing, and I could have chosen that one too to play.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying.
Yeah, I know.
What you did though, the ones you chose from the first book are my two favorites. And I love those. The other thing I just wanted to say, and this is very quick, I think especially in the B flat and from the first minor, from the first movement fugue, I think there's a role for dance in that. I don't think you dispute it, but da 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 that business, and that whole, and then the one in, well, anyway, in, the, 12th, 16th. That's a dance rhythm, isn't it?
Yes, and you know, there's a wonderful, I think maybe hour-long interview with Angela Hewitt on YouTube.
Oh, I'll have to look at that.
And she just runs through citing the number of works in the WTC that are based on dance forms.
Oh, I'll have to watch
And
that.
it's a big number. And I am not that familiar that I can just go through and say, oh yeah, this is that, that's that. And,
Oh, it's just, I'm tired of it.
but you're right, absolutely, that, yeah, we hear dance rhythms.
Mhm.
You didn't talk too much about additions. Do you have, that may be a subject for a whole other lecture or something, but.
I grew up with the Bischoff, originally published by Calmus, and it's got all the footnotes.
Yeah.
And which I really appreciate, you know, the variations that you'll find in different copies. And there have been newer editions, but I've just stuck with Bischoff. My old store, this goes back to high school, is big print. Really big print.
That's what I grew up with.
I did too.
Yeah. So, I'm not an expert on different editions.
Well, it sounded great.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, one thing, when I was in college, I was a piano major, but I wanted to take some harpsichord. And just the couple of semesters I played harpsichord as a side thing, changed the way I would play Bach, changed the way I touched the keys on the piano. Because when you're pressing the keys on a harpsichord, it's so different, I mean, it's a completely different instrument.
Oh,
And, I mean, you can't just touch the keys and they go down, you know?
Right, exactly.
And so,
It's
you know,
really
and-
different.
And I noticed that your touch on it just sounded like you were playing a harpsichord in a way,
Thank
not
you.
the sound of it, but the way you were touching the keys. And I don't know if that's a deliberate thing or whatever, but it was just beautiful to hear.
Thank you.
I think a point of interest, when I was an undergraduate, my teacher had his students play all of book one on a recital. We each played two, we all played from memory, and then the next year, we all did book two.
Wow,
And
wow.
so,
What an experience, what a
That's
journey.
pretty cool.
Well, I had no idea when I took this project on that I would fall even more deeply in love with Bach. And I have practiced Bach just about every day for maybe 2 years. Actually more than that, because before I did this, I worked on the Goldberg, which I didn't know. And I'm obsessed, and I'm not tired of playing Bach at all. If anything, after 2-3 years, I'm energized even more because I'm understanding things I never understood before. I guess you're never too old.
You're never too old. And it never ends.
Yeah, it never ends.
That's really nice.
I also want to thank you for pointing out the flexibility in classical music in general.
Thanks.
Because a lot of people think classical music is just rigid, it has to be exactly, you know, on the printed page, and you were pointing out all kinds of places where it could be flexible, all the different time signatures and the different tempos, tempi that people take, you know, and different ways you can interpret, and that's a good thing for a lot of people to know, if you don't really know a lot about classical music.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much. This was enjoyable for me.